James WOLFENSOHN, thank you very much for coming to WPC TV. You are a very distinguished former head of the World Bank, and you're now teaching in China, I think, as well as the States. Let me ask you, what do you think of the global economy at the moment?
Well, I think that what seemed to be a fixation or seemed settled in the years after the year 2000, when you had the OECD countries almost annually with 80% of the global GDP and the rest of the world with 20, and when you had sort of 1 billion people in those countries with that riches and the others were sort of always the developing countries, it was very easy to understand. And so I grew up in that era where I never had to worry. It was the rich countries, it was the poor countries. And I think what is happening now is a remarkable change, both in terms of economics and in terms of technology, as we heard this morning, in terms of governance. In fact, the whole thing is now a different world than the world that I built my career in.
And are we going back to what I suppose existed in the Middle Ages up until the Industrial Revolution, where you had half of the world's GDP effectively being sourced in China and India?
Well, you had that at several times. It was never consistent. The last time that happened was 1815, when China and India were 50% of the global GDP. And then, as I'm sure you know better than I, after World War II, China and India were down maybe at 3 or 4% of global GDP. So you've had in the recent years this tremendous change, which the West never thought would happen. Asia growing, and as we heard this morning, the estimates were that by 2050 it'll be 45%. I think it may be even larger than that. But in any event, we'll be going back to what it was in 1815. You'll have a more balanced world, but you'll also have 3 billion more people in the year 2000 in Asia. And in the West, we might have 100 million more. So it's not surprising that you're seeing this rebalancing of the world.
I mean, conventionally, people describe the 20th century as the American century. And then they go on to say the 21st century will be the century of Asia. But I mean, there's another view that actually the 21st century, certainly it'll belong in part to Asia, but it'll also belong to Africa. Do you share that view?
Well, in terms of the issues, it will be Africa, because you have 53 countries in Africa, and you'll have the population growing from currently just shy of 1 billion to 2 billion. The real issue is, with 53 countries and a very high birth rate, will you ever have control of Africa in the sense of pulling it together to benefit not only from the increase in population, but to take advantage of technology and innovation? And I have some doubts about that. Having spent 10 years at the World Bank, one of the things that worried me, and I can say that now, I'm no longer an official, is that the whole question of corruption, the whole question of lack of, if you like, future leadership outside the families, is something that has been not showing itself to be likely to eventuate. And so I'm worried about Africa. I would love to believe what is being said about it. I would love to believe that the natural resources will carry it through. But from my own personal experience, and I've been to 35 countries in Africa, my concern is that the Africans are not taking advantage of the current opportunity.
Despite the encouragement of Mo Ibrahim and his prize.
Look, I think Mo is great, and I think he's doing an excellent job. But you can pick out a few leaders. That's hugely important, as we've just seen in the death of one of the great leaders.
Indeed.
But the question is, can you have that impact with 53 different centers of government? 53. And that is problematic.
Well, let me ask you just a final, in a way, provocative question on that point. If you take South Africa now, one of the BRICS, if you put an S on the end, after the death of Mandela, Does South Africa at some point follow the route of Zimbabwe, or does it go on a path to greater prosperity, democracy, and so on?
My personal view is that it has a lot of serious questions to confront in terms of tribalism, in terms perhaps less of the European-African confrontation, which I think has been rather well handled. But I'm concerned about the passage of governance to the black majority and to the leadership, as I am in many other countries in Africa. And I think there's nothing I would like more than to see a strong South Africa. And to the extent I could have, I would have helped them greatly. But I think that it's far from certain that we will have that leadership from South Africa. You'll find much of the leadership going to Nigeria. But Nigeria also has a difficulty in putting together its governance system, despite the fact that there are a number of very, very good people in the government in Nigeria.
Well, on that note of slightly gloomy note, but perhaps a rather realistic note, I want to thank you, James Wolfensohn, for coming in.
Well, thank you very much.